When I bought my first home in a quiet suburb outside Dallas, I thought I'd finally made it. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, a cracked but charming driveway. Nothing fancy, just honest. I'd worked 12 years in HVAC repair to afford that place. Early mornings, Texas heat, torn knuckles and overtime shifts. The neighborhood looked perfect. Clean lawns, identical mailboxes, American flags on porches. It felt like stability. What I didn't realize was that I had just moved into the kingdom of the Homeowners Association. The first letter arrived 2 weeks after I moved in. Violation notice. Lawn exceeds permitted height by 0.75 inches. Fine. $75. I laughed. 3/4 of an inch? I mowed it that same evening. Then came another letter. Violation notice. Trash bin visible from street after PM. Fine. $100. It had been out for 20 minutes. Over the next month, the notices kept coming. My mailbox became a punishment dispenser. Driveway discoloration. Unapproved flower pots. My pickup truck parked in my own driveway for excessive duration. Excessive duration? I lived there. I finally attended an HOA meeting at the clubhouse. Beige walls. Folding chairs. About 20 residents, most of them retirees. At the front sat the HOA president, Linda Carver. Perfect bob haircut. Pearls. The kind of smile that never reached her eyes. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up. I've received over $500 in fines in 30 days, I said. This feels excessive. Linda adjusted her glasses. We have standards, she replied sweetly. Those standards protect property values. A few people nodded. Then she added, without lowering her voice, some residents simply aren't used to living in communities like this. The room went quiet. I felt every eye turn toward me. Communities like this. Translation? You don't belong here. I clenched my jaw. I follow the rules. Linda smiled. Then you have nothing to worry about. The meeting ended with polite applause. As people filtered out, I overheard her whisper to another board member, he'll either fall in line or move out. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't about grass height. This was about control. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the growing stack of violation letters. They had collected $575 from me in 6 weeks. I could have paid quietly and kept my head down, but something inside me refused. If they wanted to weaponize the rules, I'd learn every single one of them. And unlike Linda, I wasn't afraid to use them. The next morning, I requested a full copy of the HOA bylaws, amendments, enforcement procedures, everything. Linda's assistant looked surprised. Most homeowners don't ask for all that, she said. I'm not most homeowners, I replied. 2 days later, a 186-page PDF hit my inbox. That weekend, while my neighbors hosted barbecues and washed their SUVs, I sat at my kitchen table with a highlighter and a legal pad. Page by page, I read every clause. And that's when I realized something. The rules weren't the problem. Selective enforcement was. There were sections about visible trash bins. Yes, but also about holiday decorations lingering past approved dates. About garage doors remaining open longer than 15 minutes. About commercial signage. About unauthorized exterior modifications. And suddenly, I saw things differently when I looked out my window. 3 houses down, a basketball hoop permanently mounted above the garage, clearly a violation under non-approved structural attachments. Across the street, a boat parked in a driveway overnight, prohibited. On Linda's own lawn, decorative solar lights extending beyond the landscaping boundary line described in section 4.2. I smiled for the first time in weeks. If they wanted to enforce rules down to 3/4 of an inch, I could measure too, but I didn't rush. For 2 more weeks, I documented everything. Photos with timestamps, copies of bylaws with highlighted sections, dates, addresses, repeated violations. I even noticed something bigger. Linda's house had installed a brand new pergola in the backyard visible from the walking trail behind our neighborhood. According to the bylaws, any exterior structural addition required prior architectural committee approval. So I requested public records of approved modifications for the past 12 months. Her pergola wasn't on the list. Interesting. At the next HOA meeting, I didn't sit in the back. I sat in the front row. When public comments opened, I stood calmly. I'd like clarification, I began, holding up the bylaw packet. On enforcement consistency, Linda's smile tightened. I listed 3 addresses with violations matching mine, none find. I quoted section numbers. Then I said, and I'd like to see documentation of architectural approval for the pergola at 1482 Willow Creek Drive. That was Linda's address. The room shifted. People started whispering. Linda's face lost color for just a second before she recovered. "We follow all procedures," she said coolly. "Great," I replied. "Then transparency won't be an issue." That night, for the first time since moving in, the power dynamic changed. Because I wasn't just a guy with tall grass anymore. I was the guy who read the fine print. And Linda had underestimated one thing about me. I don't quit when I'm cornered. I calculate. After that board meeting, the neighborhood felt different. I could sense it in the way neighbors glanced at me, some with curiosity, some with cautious approval. They had seen me challenge the HOA, and they realized I wasn't just another homeowner. They realized I was paying attention. I doubled down. Every minor infraction that had been ignored before, I documented. A mailbox leaning too far, a basketball hoop mounted too high, trash bins left out past approved hours. I sent polite, professional emails to the board highlighting each inconsistency. I attached timestamps, photos, and references to the exact bylaws. Linda started responding less cheerfully. Her emails became terse, defensive, sometimes outright ignoring points I raised. But I never lost my calm. I wrote in a tone of civility and logic, making it impossible for her to claim I was being unreasonable. Then came the big moment. One Saturday morning, I noticed that one of the most expensive homes in the neighborhood had added an unapproved garden shed in their backyard, clearly visible from the street. According to Section 7.2, any external structure required prior board approval. The shed was new, unregistered, and in direct violation. I documented everything: photos, measurements, dates, and submitted it to the HOA with copies to the board and the attorney. Within hours, whispers spread through the community. The board had been caught ignoring rules that they enforced on others. Linda's control started slipping. She tried to regain it, subtly passing new memos, threatening fines, but I had prepared for everything. Each memo, each threat was countered with evidence, documentation, and the bylaws. The board attorney even started quietly advising her to tread carefully. Neighbors began approaching me privately, asking for advice. Some admitted they had felt bullied by the HOA in the past. Some confessed they were tired of arbitrary fines. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was becoming the voice of fairness in the neighborhood. And all the while, I kept my ultimate goal in mind: exposing Linda's hypocrisy. Her pergola, the structure that had started this whole battle, remained unapproved. I continued collecting evidence, double-checking every measurement, and preparing a formal complaint that no one, including her, could ignore. This was no longer just about a lawn or trash bins. This was about accountability, about rules being applied equally to everyone. And deep down, I knew once I delivered my final move, the neighborhood would never see Linda's reign of selective enforcement the same way again. The quiet war had escalated, and I was winning. By the 4th month, the dynamic in the neighborhood had completely shifted. I wasn't just a new guy anymore. I was the one holding the HOA accountable. Every board meeting, Linda's carefully curated aura of control felt thinner, more fragile. The room no longer hummed with her authority. It buzzed with tension, uncertainty, and curiosity about what I would do next. I had spent weeks preparing my next move. The pergola issue remained my trump card. It was technically minor, but symbolically massive. It represented everything the HOA had done to me: hypocrisy, selective enforcement, arrogance. And now, with evidence in hand, I was ready to confront it head-on. During the next public comment session, I stood up calmly, holding my folder of meticulously documented evidence. I addressed the board, voice steady. Section 5.4 clearly requires a 2-foot setback from the property line for all exterior structures. The pergola at 1482 Willow Creek Drive exceeds this setback by 2 feet. According to Section 9.1, violations of this nature must result in a formal notice and corrective action within 30 days. Murmurs ran through the room. A few neighbors leaned forward, eyes widening. Linda's smile faltered. She tried to interrupt, but I continued. I have included photographs, measurements, and a copy of the city zoning map. I request that the board issue a formal notice of violation and enforce corrective measures consistent with all other violations in this neighborhood. The board attorney cleared his throat. Based on the documentation provided, it appears to meet the criteria for a violation, he said cautiously. Linda's color drained. We will review this, she stammered. That evening, whispers spread like wildfire. Neighbors congratulated me subtly, handshakes, nods, quiet smiles. Word had already reached those who previously cowered under the HOA's selective enforcement. They saw that even the president wasn't above the rules. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. This was only the first domino. Over the next weeks, I continued sending formal, polite reminders of past fines issued inconsistently, asking for documentation, approvals, and enforcement details. Slowly, Linda's power eroded. Fines she had once threatened to impose on me were quietly dismissed or waived for others. Board members became hesitant, careful with every word, and as I reviewed my folder one night, a smile crept across my face. I had turned every unfair rule, every arbitrary fine, and every injustice into leverage. The neighborhood, once an arena of humiliation for me, was now a place where I held the cards. The tides had turned, and soon, the final move would end the HOA's reign of hypocrisy once and for all. It all came to a head during the HOA's annual general meeting. The clubhouse was packed, more people than I had ever seen at one meeting. I could feel the tension in the air, a mix of curiosity, excitement, and anticipation. Linda sat at the front, trying to maintain her polished composure, but I could see the unease flickering behind her perfectly rehearsed smile. When public comments began, I stood confidently, folder in hand. Good evening, I started. I'm here to address issues of consistency and accountability in our community. I laid out my evidence, violations that had gone ignored, fines imposed selectively, and of course, the pergola. Each page I held up had photos, measurements, and references to the exact bylaws. The room went silent, neighbors leaning in to follow every detail. This isn't about personal disputes, I continued. It's about fairness, about ensuring that the rules we all agreed to are applied equally to everyone, including the HOA board itself. I looked directly at Linda. If the president cannot comply with the rules, how can we expect homeowners to? The board shifted uncomfortably. Linda's cheeks flushed, and for the first time, she didn't have a prepared response. The attorney cleared his throat and said, "Technically, these are valid concerns. The board will review the violations and take appropriate action." By the next week, official notices went out. The pergola had to be adjusted to meet setback requirements. Fines previously imposed on me for trivial infractions were reversed. Other homeowners began calling the board, citing my emails and requesting similar documentation, demanding fair enforcement. Linda tried to regain control, but her authority had evaporated. Neighbors stopped seeing me as just a troublemaker. Some even thanked me for standing up, for holding the board accountable. I had transformed from a target into a symbol of fairness. Walking through the neighborhood that Saturday, I noticed subtle changes. Lawns were maintained voluntarily, trash bins were placed correctly, but most importantly, a sense of balance had returned. The HOA rules were no longer weapons, they were standards, applied equally to everyone. I smiled, knowing that sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't loud or destructive. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated, and visible to everyone. I hadn't just defended myself, I had reshaped the neighborhood, restored fairness, and exposed hypocrisy. And as I passed Linda's house, pergola still slightly crooked, I whispered under my breath, "Never underestimate the guy who reads the fine print." Justice, measured and precise, had been served.